Good morning and welcome to a new episode of the Raising Musos podcast, the resource for parents who have children learning music. And so we are here to provide advice, insights into what music learning is like. My name is Eliza. I am the director of Music Makers Academy. We are a music school located in Joondalup, Western Australia. And as you can tell from the video, we are definitely in the winter right now. Sort of got the sniffles. My husband has been sick with a cold and my mother-in-law with a sore throat. So I'm just trying to hang in there and hopefully not fall sick myself. So if you hear me sniff a lot, sorry about that. I don't know, just have not a runny nose, but the sniffles. So today is episode 31, according to my notes, which are not always accurate, but if this is episode 31 and this is your first time listening, a warm welcome to you. But just know that there are 30 other episodes you can listen to, depending on what kind of questions you might have. And this particular episode I'm going to do today, it's sort of about me, but it's about how I have changed as a teacher. Because I have been giving lessons since, basically like 10 years, I would say. And so, of course, over that time, I have tried things. I have, assessed how I do things. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about how, my practice as a teacher, so like my skill and my craft as a teacher has changed over the years. Because I would say, I think I have gotten better as a teacher. I invested in courses to develop my skills. I've also spent a lot of money on resources and access to professional networks and all of that kind of stuff. So I thought it would be interesting to tell you a little bit more about what teaching is like and how we become better at what we do. But first, I'm actually going to start with a couple of announcements. Actually, just one announcement, really. It's that, so I think when this episode's going to come out, it's going to be in August. I record episodes like a month early, so right now, the time that I'm recording this, it's actually mid-July, but you're listening to the episode in August. So anyway, if you are in Perth, my music school is putting on a tutor concert on Sunday, 31st of August at 2 p.m. at Padbury Hall in Padbury. So if you are interested, please go to our Facebook page and look for the event, and we'll have the link to buy tickets. Basically, it's going to be a very fun, family-friendly concert where some of our tutors are going to play. So you'll hear different instruments like electric piano, violin, guitar, harp, probably voice and flute as well. That's still to be confirmed. And then we'll actually be we'll spread ourselves around the room, and we'll welcome families to go around and meet each tutor, have a look at the instruments from up close, maybe try touching and playing a few sounds and things like that. So it's just a very fun event. So you just need to book a ticket and try to invite as many people as you can. So that is my special announcement for August. So now I'm going to dive into today's actual episode content. And as I mentioned at the start, I'm going to be sharing with you how I have changed as a teacher. But first, I thought I would actually start by saying what things have stayed consistent over my 10 years of teaching. And I suppose the things that have stayed consistent are things related to my personality as a teacher and sort of my vibe as a teacher. So I think, one of my strength as a teacher is just my patience. And I think that is something that has stayed pretty consistent throughout this entire time. It's just how patient I am with my students. I rarely, patient with behavior issues, I don't like raise my voice. Patience with progress. So I have certain expectations around progress, but if my expectations are not met, like it's not a big deal to me. It's just telling me the student needs a bit more time or maybe a different way of being taught a particular thing, or just more reinforcement and practice over a certain aspect of either like a theory or they're playing. So I think my patience has stayed the same. Periods when I'm like really, really tired, I'm definitely less patient. Like, just like everyone is like that, when you're like stretched thin and you're very exhausted and things are not quite going your way, which when you teach, that happens a lot, you're more likely to sort of snap. And that has happened occasionally, but it's really quite rare for me to sort of show any outward sign of impatience with a student. I really keep it to myself. If I'm impatient, with a student, or I'm just getting frustrated that they're not making the progress I'm hoping or expecting for, I sort of hide that from them, which makes me come across as very patient. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, I've always been a very patient person. Sort of the whole delayed gratification thing. Like I'm able to wait and to really let the student pace themselves. Another aspect of my teaching that has stayed consistent is sort of, again, my personality of being quite gentle. So as I said before, I don't raise my voice. I mostly speak quietly. I'm not an overly excitable person, so I'm just always very calm during my lessons, and I think that helps students to feel to just feel safe and to help them calm down and feel sort of centered and focused during the lessons. So I think my gentleness and my introvertedness is actually sort of an advantage for this situation. Not to dismiss teachers who are more extroverted or excitable, because they are able to bring the kind of energy that I'm not. But I think for the purpose of one-to-one tutoring, sort of being a more quiet type of person is really beneficial, especially for some of my students who are quite similar to me. I have quite a lot of also very sort of quiet, very introverted shy students, so they feel I probably think that they relate to me, and I can definitely relate to them as well. Something else that has stayed consistent is my presence during my lesson. And I sort of define that by my ability to listen to a student and well, hopefully, make them feel seen and heard. For a lot of my students, we spend the first 5 to 10, sometimes 10 minutes. I even have an adult. We spend like 45 minutes of an hour just having a really good conversation. And so yeah, they, a lot of students just really enjoy coming to their lessons to tell me about their week or their day. So my ability to be present for them is very important, and it helps to establish trust and connection with them. And again, that element of safety, because they feel that I understand, what they've been going through, and then playing music in front of me isn't as scary. Something else that has stayed the same as well in my teaching is just how firm I am. So I know it might sound contradictory because I talked about how I'm patient and gentle, but when required, I can be firm with students. If a student is really showing disrespect or starting to muck around a little bit too much, getting off track, I'm able to not raise my, like, I don't yell, but I just sort of say in a stern voice, come on, we have to go back to what we're doing here. We have to refocus. And so I don't, I don't overdo the stern thing, because at the same time, I can realize that children are children and they really need to let off some steam sometimes and play around, and they probably have like way more energy than I do. So I try to, let kids be kids. But when things are starting to not go in the right direction, I'm able to, remind them that I'm the one in charge and this is what needs to be done. I remember one time I ran a small group class at my music school, and one of the kids, just in the first 5 minutes of class, he was talking over me and trying to make these really cool jokes to impress everyone else, and I was like, I better do something about this before it gets too much. So within the first 5 minutes of class, I said to him, you're here to learn, the kids are here to learn. If you want to interrupt my class, please go outside, because I don't welcome that behavior here. But if you want to stay and learn, then you just need to be quiet. And I gave him the choice, either he could leave or he could stay. And he was really shocked that I was so firm so soon in my class. But he learned his lesson, and then for the rest of the class he was fine. So I'm able to be firm if the situation requires it, but it's not something that I particularly enjoy doing. So something else that has also stayed the same with my teaching is just the use of classical music. I think this is, obviously because of my own background as a classical musician. I was a classically trained pianist, classically trained harpist. Classical music always was and probably always will be a big part of my life, a big part of my career, and I still teach it, even though sometimes I know that students, would rather play pop songs. Most of the time, I try to give them a bit of a classical training just to expand their horizon. How do you even pronounce that word? Horizon. And because I think classical music is worth studying for a little bit, getting to know, because pop songs tend to be quite repetitive. So classical music, I am still, I enjoy teaching it as well. So that has always been a part of my teaching. And now something else that has stayed constant as well is, this one might be a little bit surprising, but undervaluing myself. I just think about what I do. I just give music lessons, and that's not really much else to it. I think I don't realize like the impact that my presence or my teaching might be having on people. I just don't think about it. And I just think that everyone could do what I do, and that I don't do it in any kind of amazing way. So I don't think particularly highly of my teaching. And so, there's been a couple of times when I have requested families to switch teacher to lighten my workload, and then they come back to me and they say, no, my child only wants you as their teacher. And so that, for me, that has been a bit of a learning curve. It's just like sort of trying to understand that actually I'm good at what I do. The kids, even the adults, just really love having lessons with me, and I'm just sitting there like, why? Why? Like, I'm sure this other teacher would be just as good, if not better. So yeah, undervaluing myself, because I just don't think about the impact that I have. I'm just do what I do, then I don't think about it anymore. And when I hear about the impact that I'm having on kids, it's sort of like, really? Really? Okay, so now I'm gonna go through a couple of things the things that have changed in my teaching. So the first is that I teach concepts in different ways. So this is especially like theory and sort of or like oral concepts. And mostly I attribute this change to Nicola Kenton. So Nicola Kenton is a piano teacher, I think in Dublin. And she created this platform called Vibrant Music Teaching. And every year I pay a membership for that particular platform. And on this platform, there are literally hundreds of music games that you can print out and use during your lessons. But she also has a number of courses and like lesson plans that you can use during your lessons. And so, when I first started out as an inexperienced teacher, I would just get the student to buy a book, and then I would sort of go through the book in order and explain the theory concepts as we went. But what Nicola Kenton is, she's an advocate of, I think she calls it like preemptive like theory or preemptive teaching, which basically means that, say, you know that the student is going to learn how to read a particular rhythm. Well, you try to teach them the sound of that rhythm before they get to see it. So you give them sort of an introduction to the theory concept that they are going to learn later on. So they already have some exposure to it before you get to the nitty-gritty of it. So I try to do that a little bit more in my teaching, where I try to teach or get the student familiar with particular sounds before they learn the theoretical part of it. So that's something that has changed in my teaching. A second thing that has changed in my teaching are the resources that I use. And now I use a lot more games in my teaching. So obviously the games, I don't create them myself, that would take me hours. So I do pay the membership fee to Vibrant Music Teaching every year so that I have access to all of these games. And I know which game to use every lesson because of the lesson plans that are provided in this platform. And so first of all, the students love the games. Every single lesson, the student would be like, "Can we play the game now?" Like, they don't know what game they're going to play that lesson, but they do know that there should be a game in the lesson. So like, they really like come to expect to play a game. It's so first of all, it's not just like a lot of fun for them. It's educational, obviously, because it's always related to an aspect of music that they are currently working on or learning about. But I also use the games as sort of like a little brain break. So obviously, because like playing the instrument, maybe reading music, it really is quite intensive of an exercise. It does require a lot of concentration, a lot of focus. So when I feel that we've been playing piano for like long enough, let's just take a little break for our brain to just relax. I use the games and they work great. And I didn't used to play music games before. This is something that I started doing maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's been very, very popular. Something else that I do differently is the use of singing. So I sing a lot more when I teach. So whether that's, especially with beginners, when they're learning those very short songs, often they might have lyrics. So I just try to sing with the hope that the student is going to sing along, which sometimes they do. I think singing is an amazing tool for learning music. I think it's actually like one of the strongest tools for learning music. So by singing myself, I try to encourage the student to sing as well, to develop their inner ear, to develop their pitch, their phrasing, their expression. Just so many benefits to singing. Something new as well that I started doing maybe 3 or 4 years ago is just using improvisation during my lessons. Again, this is just something that I wasn't ever taught when I was having lessons. But again, it's something that Nicola Kenton strongly advocates for. And so usually an improv during one of my lessons would just be a couple of minutes long. And I'll try to link it to something that the student is working on. So for example, if a student has just learned the staccato technique at the piano, which means playing the notes really short and bouncy, then I'm going to ask the student to improvise with me using the staccato technique. They just make up the notes, but they have to use the technique that they have just learned. So improvisation, again, has lots of benefits, creativity. The student feels like they can't get anything wrong because they're making it up. So it's very freeing for them. It's quite fun. We can play around with dynamics, expression, and mood. We can strengthen a particular technique. We can learn new scales and things like that. So I have found that students really love improvisation. They just love to make things up, to explore the different sounds available to them. So that has been a very positive move in my teaching. Something else that has changed are the books that I use for my students. This is more so for piano. So basically what happened when I started teaching piano, I didn't really know what I was doing, to be completely fair. I'm a good pianist. I have a decent technique. But because I learnt piano so young, I don't remember how I was taught. And so when I started teaching, I quickly realized that my students had like horrible technique, and I didn't know why. Because for me, piano is just very natural. My piano technique is very natural. So I couldn't understand why my students just had bad technique, why the notes didn't sound beautiful. I was just quite confused. So I started again doing some research. I invested in a piano pedagogy course, and so now I have come across this piano method book that I love and that I recommend to all my teachers. But that has really revolutionized how I teach piano, especially to very, very young children, because teaching a good technique to children is a lot more difficult than it sounds. So just the books that I use for my students have changed. Oh my goodness. All right, I have a couple more points. So let me just quickly go and run through them. So something else that has changed, I think, as well, is my ability to adapt to different students. So I'm able to sort of see where the student is at during the lesson, how much practice that they've done, and I'll be able to adapt my lesson plan to where they are. So sometimes in a lesson, I might just spend the whole lesson like sort of practicing a piece with the student if they haven't done much practice, or if they don't seem in a very good mood, they just need to chill. Like I won't do much instrumental work, but maybe I'll do more improvisation, maybe some theory games, that kind of thing. So I think I'm able to see where the student is at and adapt that particular lesson to how they feel. I've also gotten way better at teaching specific techniques from obviously doing it so much, but also from the professional training that I've invested in. So especially, as I mentioned before, like my piano teaching has gotten a lot better from the piano teacher training that I took. And so now I'm also able to, to see a student's technique and to sort of like diagnose what is wrong and what are some little exercises or tweaks that they can do to improve their technique. And so that has also impacted sort of my confidence as a teacher and, slightly less imposter syndrome, I suppose. And then something else, the final thing that has changed, I'm not sure if it's the final, but it's one of the other things that has changed, is I don't really use the metronome as much in my lessons, especially with the little children. But I use backing tracks, and that's a lot more interactive, a lot more exciting, and a lot more musical for them. So I think it's a lot better than just using the metronome. So I don't use the metronome extensively in my teaching anymore. So there you go. That is a little summary of, what has changed for me as a teacher. The things that I do differently when I teach and why. And also what has stayed the same. So obviously that this has been 10 years in the making. I first started teaching when I was out of university in 2015, so can't believe it's been that long. That's crazy. So let me know what you thought of this episode. I always love hearing from you, so you can leave me a comment below this YouTube video, or you can send me a message on Instagram. And other than that, thanks again for listening, and I will see you next week for another episode. Bye!